Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with another video in our macOS development with AppKit tutorial series. And in this particular tutorial, we are going to be taking a look at how we can create touch bars in our applications. Now, what is a touch bar? Well, the touch bar is that slim little glass display above your keyboard on some models of the MacBook Pro. Now, this will most often replace the function keys. Excuse me. And oftentimes it'll have an escape key. Sometimes it may not, depending on what you're doing in the touch bar, but usually it'll have an escape key down on the left hand side. Not a physical escape key, mind you, but a digital one that you can tap on. Okay, now this touch bar can dynamically change based on what part of your app you're on, what screen you're on, that kind of thing. So it's dynamic. It doesn't strictly stay the same. Now, each view controller has a touch bar because for each window, for each screen, for each view controller, you might want to display different things. So with that, let's kind of talk a little bit about how exactly a touch bar is constructed. Well, a touch bar is constructed with an NSTouchBar object, and then this object is populated with a bunch of NSTouchBarItem instances. Now, this can be an instance of NSTouchBarItem itself or one of AppKit's built-in subclasses. Excuse me. So there are many built-in subclasses for NSTouchBarItem. I urge you to go and look at the documentation for NSTouchBarItem, where at the bottom of the page you'll find an inherited by section with a comprehensive list of all the different TouchBarItem subclasses that AppKit gives us. Today we're going to be using the NS custom TouchBarItem because there is no subclass specifically for segmented controls. So we have to use NS custom TouchBarItem. But if you wanted a button, there's a TouchBarItem subclass for buttons. There's one for sliders. There's scrubbers. There's all kinds of stuff there that you can take a look at. macOS also gives you plenty of TouchBarItem identifiers that you can use for the most common touch bar controls, like a color picker and character pickers and stuff like that. And that brings me to my next point. Each individual touch bar item in the touch bar has to be uniquely identifiable. So you have to give each item a unique identifier, much like you have to give a toolbar and its toolbar items unique identifiers. Inherently, because each view controller has its own touch bar, you don't need to specifically give a touch bar an identifier because each view controller can only have one touch bar. All right, so let's go ahead and start writing some code here. So in Xcode, I'm going to run the app that we have to start with, and so we can see what that looks like. All right, so here's our app. You can see we have a segmented control in our toolbar with Apple and Swift as the only two options. What this is going to do when we're done is when we click a specific segment, the image view in the center of our window will change. So right now it's on the Apple logo by default, but when we click Swift, it'll change to the SF symbol for the Swift logo. And then if we click Apple, it'll change back to the Apple logo. And as we flip the state of the segmented control in our toolbar, the segmented control that we're going to have in our touch bar will mirror it. So both controls' states will remain in sync. This is important because you don't want your touch bar to reflect a different state than your toolbar control does. You want them to remain in sync. All right, so let's get started by first creating an identifier for our custom touch bar item. And we can do that by creating an extension on NSTouchBarItem.identifier. So above our view controller class, we're going to say extension NSTouchBarItem.identifier. And in this extension, we're going to have a static constant, which is going to be of type NSTouchBarItem.identifier. And in that initializer, we'll take a string, which is a unique identifier for the item. So we'll say static let. We'll call it symbol picker equals NSTouchBarItem.identifier. And we'll say com.joshdev.symbol-picker. All right, so there is our unique identifier. Now you don't have to provide part or your entire bundle identifier. I'm just doing that to ensure uniqueness. Because every bundle identifier has to be unique on its own. So that's a good way to ensure uniqueness. All right, so now that we have our NSTouchBarItem identifier extension, we need to create a delegate for our touch bar. Now, you could have your view controller conform to NSTouchBarDelegate, and that would work fine, but it's better practice to have a separate object for your delegates and your data sources. So that's what we're going to do here. So beneath our extension, we will say class touchBarDelegate. And then we're going to inherit from NS object, and then we're going to conform to NSTouchBarDelegate. And we're going to open that up. Now, one thing of note here is that you must have NS object first before any protocol conformances in this case, because if it's not, Xcode will yell at you. And you don't want to have any errors in that regard. Otherwise, you're going to feel rather silly. All right. So the first thing that we want inside of our delegate is a segmented control that we're going to use in our touch bar for our touch bar item. So we'll say var symbol picker equals, or rather not equals, we'll have this be of type NS segmented control. Then we're going to override the default initializer, so the empty initializer. This comes from NSObject, so override init like that. And then in here, inside of this initializer, we are going to initialize our segmented control. So self dot symbol picker equals NS segmented control. Let's see here. We want the one with a string array for some labels. Inside of this array, we'll have Apple and Swift, like that. Then the tracking mode will be select 1. The target will be nil. And the action will be nil initially as well. Excuse me. We will set an action explicitly later on, but initially it'll be nil. Right, and that is our initializer. Next, we need a single method inside of our delegate, and that is makeItemForIdentifier. Now, this will return an optional NSTouchBarItem. This, this touchbar item is, of course, going to. We want to return whatever touchbar item we need based on the identifier. Similar to how we did for our toolbars and for our cells in a table view and a collection view and all that stuff. This is a very common thing that you're going to be doing in AppKit. So if you understand the mechanics of how this works, you'll be able to do it for almost any view that requires something like this. So we'll say touchbar makeItemForIdentifier. All right, so here we'll say var item. We'll say NSTouchBarItem. We're going to make this optional. So by default, it'll be nil. Now we'll say switch. And we want to switch on the identifier. We'll say here we'll say well, actually, because we only have one item here, we can just say if identifier is equal to dot symbol picker, then we'll say item dot item equals NS custom touchbar item, like that. Then we'll say item dot view. That will be equal to our symbol picker segmented control. Here we'll pass in the we want to give our custom touchbar item an identifier. In this case, it'll be the identifier there. Item dot customization label. So if you want to make your touch bar customizable, which most of the time you will, you need to have a label for your control that gets displayed in the macOS touch bar customization window. So keep in mind this is a string. I'm not going to do anything with a customization label because I don't want the user to be able to remove this control. More often than not, you're not going to want to force a touch bar control on your users, but in this case, it's vital to the functionality of the app. So it's entirely up to you whether or not you want it to be customizable or not. Ultimately, I'm choosing to make sure that it's not customizable, but I'm still going to go through some of these properties anyway, so you know what they are. Item dot let's see. You can also get a view controller whose view will be displayed in the touch bar. You can set the visibility priority of a touch bar item. And as the inline docs here indicate, the visibility priority allows you to specify which items should be visible when space on the touch bar is limited. So you shouldn't, one thing about the touch bar in that regard is that you should not assume that you have the entire touch bar to yourself. Some people will have the system controls like controlling brightness or volume, as well as media playback, stuff like that. So you shouldn't assume that you have everything to yourself. Yeah, you have to be smart about it. All right. So really with that pretty much does it for what we need to do here. And we can just then go and say return item like that. Okay, this should also be NS custom touch bar item. Like that. Okay, there we go. And that is our delegate done. It's relatively simple when you only have one item, but it gets a little bit more complicated as you get more items in there. But still, it's pretty easy to adapt. It's just you have to code it slightly differently, using a switch, for example, when you have more than one item. But because we only have one item, it's not a huge deal to just use an if statement. All right, and with that, the last step is to actually create the touch bar. And we can do that by overriding a method from NSViewController, and that is makeTouchBar. This method will return an optional NSTouchBar because, well, not every view controller is going to have a custom touch bar. So it has to be optional, right? So when we override it, we are going to have a touch bar. So nowhere are we going to return nil, really, in this method. But it has to return an optional NSTouchBar because otherwise you're not overriding a method, you're just creating a new one. All right, so before we actually override this method, we are going to create an object for our touchbar delegate. So var touchbar delegate equals touchbar delegate, like that. So now we have access to it. All right. So here, we'll go above our configure method, and we'll create a override of func make touchbar. And the first thing that you might want to do in here is do NSApp, which is referencing the application itself. So NSApp dot is, let's see, is automatic touch bar customization item enabled. Now, this property, when it's set to true, will have a customized touch bar menu item in your in your macOS menu bar for customizing the touch bar. We're going to set this to false. So false, like that. So that way we don't have that menu item in our menu bar. And that's because, we're not going to allow our touch bar to be customizable. So why have it there if it's not going to be customizable? All right. Now we can actually customize our touch bar. So we'll say let touchbar equals NSTouchBar. This isn't going to take in an initial, like an identifier or anything like that. We'll say touchbar So touchbar dot. Now, customization allowed item identifiers. What this is it's pretty much an array of touchbar item identifiers to let macOS know what items should be customizable. What items we should allow for customization in the touch bar. We aren't going to. We're not going to use this because, again, my touch bar is not going to be customizable. But if you want yours to be, you can set this. You can set this value pretty simply by using an array of your custom item identifiers, or any system identifiers. Really, it just depends on what you want to do with your touch bar. Now, customization identifier. This is of type NSTouchBarCustomization identifier, and this is the identifier used to make sure that macOS is able to uniquely identify which touch bar is being customized. So this is vital if you want your touch bar to be customizable. Again, we're not going to do that, but you could. Now, customization required identifiers. What this will do is it will allow you to set the identifiers for items that you don't want to be customizable. right? So here we'll say equals an array of symbol picker, like that. TouchBar dot delegate. This will be the delegate we just created. Equals TouchBarDelegate. TouchBar dot default item identifiers. This is an array of TouchBar item identifiers that are used to tell macOS which items should appear initially in the touch bar. And then in this array, we will have symbol picker. TouchBar dot let's see. The next one that I'm going to set is principal item identifier. And what this property pretty much allows you to do is it allows you to specify which touch bar item should appear in the center of the touch bar as its principal item. So here, I'm going to say the symbol picker item is the one that we want for our principal item. Now, maybe you don't have one that you want to be directly in the center of your touch bar, and that's fine. You don't have to set this property if you don't want to, but I'm going to anyway. All right. And that's pretty much it really for the touch bar. Now we will return touch bar. All right. Now, before we actually go to finish up by coding our value changed method that we're going to use, we need to set the action in the segmented control in our delegate. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say TouchBarDelegate dot symbol picker dot action equals #selector value changed. All right. Now, one thing I also want to do that we didn't do and we should have is inside of our initializer. I need to set the tag on the symbol picker inside of our touch bar delegate. Self.symbolpicker.tag equals 1. Now, the reason why I need to use a tag here is because both of our segmented controls, the one in the toolbar and the one in the touch bar, are going to call the same action method, value changed. So we need to be able to identify which segmented control called the method. And we can do that by having a tag assigned to each segmented control. In the toolbar, the tag of our segmented control is 0. In the touch bar, it'll be 1. So that way we know which control actually called the method. All right. Now, I want to make sure that we have the action, with our toolbar item as well. Okay, yep, we do. We're good. So now we can go all the way back down here. And inside of our value changed method here, the first thing we want to do is we want to get the tag of the sender, which you can see inside of the parameter list is an NS segmented control. And we can do that by saying let tag equals sender.tag. Like that. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to change the item, or the image rather, in our image view. And we'll say let image, or Apple image, equals NS image, system symbol name, Apple logo, and then the accessibility description, which is an optional string, will be the Apple logo. All right, then we'll say let Swift image equals NS image with a system symbol name of Swift and an accessibility description of the Swift logo, like that. All right, so next we will say symbol image, or rather, for the only other thing that we need to do before we do anything is let selected segment equals sender selected segment. All right. All right. All right. Dot image. So symbol image dot image equals selected segment equals 0 question mark Apple image. Otherwise, it'll be the Swift image, like that. Lastly, we need to keep our segmented controls in sync. So we'll say switch tag case 0. So if the sender was the toolbar's segmented control, we want to say TouchBarDelegate dot, it should be symbol picker dot selected segment equals sender dot selected segment. Case 1, so if the segmented control that called this method is the one in the touch bar, we will say toolbar NSTouchBarDelegate dot symbol picker dot selected segment equals sender dot selected segment. Just like that. Save that. And then we need a default case, so default, and we will simply just return. Because if we don't know which segmented control it was, if it's not 0 or 1 for its tag, then something clearly went wrong, or we haven't set a tag somewhere or something like that. So we just want to return, do nothing. All right, let's save this. I'm going to go into my issue navigator here. And okay, so we'll take a look here at this error. Okay. Okay. All right, so let's fix this here where the selector is incorrect. Value changed like that. Okay. And there we go. That is our code for the touch bar. Now, if you don't already, if you don't have it up already, I want you to go to Window. Okay, so up in the macOS toolbar or macOS menu bar, go to Window, and you'll find a submenu called Touch Bar. Open that up, and you'll find 3 items. Well, 2 to 3 items. If you already have it up, you'll see Hide Touch Bar. You can have Touch Bar first generation or Touch Bar second generation. This is where you can bring up a touch bar for you to look at and see if your touch bar controls actually work and interact with them and stuff like that. If you don't have a Mac that has a touch bar already on its keyboard. Now, VoiceOver doesn't work with the touch bar simulator, unfortunately, so I can't really demonstrate it to you. I can only point you to look at this touch bar simulator. If you have a touch bar built into your Mac, then that'll be good, because then you can actually interact with it physically on the device, and you can use VoiceOver with it and all that sort of stuff. But let's go ahead and run the app. All right, so here is our application again. You can see the touch bar control for our segmented control there in the simulator, both of which should have the Apple selected. If not, make sure that you set that property. Let's go back actually just to double check. I don't think I initialized that property. I might not have. No, I did not. So let's go ahead and remedy that. Symbol picker dot selected segment equals 1, or not 1, 0. So it'll be so Apple will be selected. Let's try that again. All right, there we go. Now everything is in sync. Go ahead and change the selection in your toolbar or your touch bar. Let's select Swift. Now Swift is selected in both places, and the image has changed. Right? We can change it back to the Apple logo. And again, not only does the image change, but both segmented controls remain in sync. All right, so that pretty much does it for this video on how we can implement touch bar support in your macOS applications. Don't worry, this code will be silently ignored on macOS on Macs rather that don't have a touch bar. But if you need to support something that is before macOS 10.12.2, you will need to have some platform conditional stuff, some OS version conditional stuff in your code to make it work. But really, that's actually pretty simple to do. I urge you to look online for how to do that. What you're going to be looking for is the @available attribute. All right. So thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.